Let's go straight now to Greg Sheridan. He's foreign editor at The Australian. And Greg, the final major set piece for Anthony Albanese in the campaign at the Press Club, foreign policy did feature, didn't it? Doesn't always, but it did. And I guess part of the fact is that if he wins on Saturday, he'll be straight to it on the foreign front with the Quad meeting in Tokyo within days.
Yeah, that's right, Kieran. So I agree that Albo looked pretty relaxed and performed well today, but I thought it was telling that the predominant message for me out of his speech was an attack on Morrison. So this has been, I think, a pretty shabby, low-rate campaign, but it's really been two campaigns against, so the government's, the opposition's message is the incumbent is horrible, the government's message is the alternative is dangerous. And I thought, in a sense, it showed the tightening of the polls that Albo went back to his core message, which is that Morrison is horrible. In general, he was sound on foreign policy. Certainly it is the correct decision to go straight to the Quad. Whoever is elected, let's hope we get a clear result on Saturday. It would be crazy to pass up the opportunity for a personal meeting with Biden, Modi and the Japanese Prime Minister. In general, Albo was pretty sensible on foreign policy. His speech itself contained nothing about national security. I thought that was a bit odd. And some of the things he said about foreign policy were a bit silly, such as that Australia suffers from not having a more proactive position on climate change. Well, that's baloney. I'd like to see a single thing that Australia has missed out on because of a lack of enthusiasm on climate change. But he did again stress the bipartisan basis of Australian foreign policy.
Yeah, he did that very clearly when it comes to China. They have wanted to reiterate their support for AUKUS, which the Prime Minister says is a major legacy of this term in office, although there have been some criticisms around the timing of the briefing associated with AUKUS, Greg.
Yeah, so my criticism of AUKUS is I'm wildly in favour of AUKUS, but it's not going to give us any submarines in a usable time frame. So my criticism of it is that it's symbolism rather than substance. Now, the specific criticism that Labor makes arising out of Peter Hartcher's extremely interesting and good story at the weekend, that the government was in negotiations for 5.5 months before it briefed Labor, and the Americans were very insistent that it have bipartisan support. Nonetheless, I think Labor's criticisms here are baloney, and the government was quite right not to brief Labor until the last minute. The Americans ultimately decided they'd leave the Australian politics to the Australian government, but the deal would have fallen over if it didn't get bipartisan support. But the danger of a leak was enormous. The government kept almost all of its cabinet in the dark, and a very large majority of the senior national security bureaucracy in the dark. The idea that it could have simultaneously briefed Labor's entire leadership group, Albanese, Wong, Miles, Brendan O'Connor, and hoped that it wouldn't leak, that would be just too risky. And in fact, the fact that Washington, London and Canberra kept it secret until the announcement, even after that meeting of Biden, Johnson and Morrison in England at the G7, which should have been a clue for us. How slack all of us analysts are that we didn't get the clue out of that. The fact that they kept it secret was a tremendous achievement and a sign of how serious they are. So I think Labor's criticism of the government here is just complete baloney, and the execution of AUKUS, I think that's a feather in the government's cap. They did really well to bring that off diplomatically.
With the tightening in the latest polls, it has raised the prospect again of a hung parliament in the next term. What are the implications, as you see it, for foreign policy and defence policy?
Well, I think they are very dire, Kieran, to be honest with you. I fervently hope that either Scott Morrison or Anthony Albanese is elected Prime Minister with a majority of 6, at least, 5 or 6, something like that. A government in any event will not be able to get legislation through the Senate. So we're going to have the sort of paralysed, slow-moving, glacial government that we've got used to in recent years anyway. But a government which depends all the time for its survival on single issue monomaniacs about climate change will not be able to make the kind of trade-offs that are necessary to produce coherent policy. Certainly, you're going to need a very pragmatic view of fossil fuels if you're going to generate the money which is going to be necessary to pay for national security. None of the Teals, none of the independents, except for Rex Patrick in the Senate, has the slightest interest, slightest constructive interest in national security whatsoever. It also means if you're a minority government, you are also hostage to any disaffected backbencher on your own side. Now, the last time we had minority government under Julia Gillard, she couldn't do really sensible things like the Malaysia solution, which she proposed to do to buttress border control. And really, the government couldn't do anything except what had the support of the Greens. The Greens' policies on national security are crackers. They want to cut the defence budget in half. They don't, they oppose AUKUS and all the rest of it. And I think
Greg,
catering to their obsessions would mean a government would not be doing national security.
We will be talking next Wednesday and analysing the Quad. Who knows who will be there representing our nation. But Greg, thank you as always. And Sky News has the biggest and the best election night panel. This Saturday, I'll be joined by an all-star lineup bringing you the quickest results and the best analysis. We're also live right across the nation, speaking to all the winners and losers, plus Sky's season lineup of expert presenters will weigh in with the big breaking news. That's all live. We're getting off early, 5 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. Make sure you're with us Saturday.